Good morning, everyone. We were going slowly through the various Meleches of Shabbos. And I believe, if I'm not mistaken, that last time we learned together, we spoke primarily about Ma'ameh, which was the act of gathering up the fallen produce in the field. We even spoke a little bit about Ma'ameh, applying the applications of Ma'ameh in the house, on the dining room table. We spoke about gathering up fruits and things like that, and why that isn't a problem, and why Ma'ameh only happens in the place in which the food originally grew, Besoda, we said, in the original location. Then you gather, then there's this concept of gathering in. And we're going to move to the next Melacha now, which is the Melacha of Dosh, of threshing. Now, actually, the Melacha of Dosh is very vast. Dosh, threshing. Now, what is threshing? Threshing is in a very primitive sense. We'll talk about what happened in the olden days before the combine harvester and the invention of modern machinery. The act of threshing was where, after the wheat or whatever it was, the produce had been cut from the ground. It was broken. It was smashed and hit in order for the kernels of grain to remove themselves, to fly out of the shell, the outer encasing that they'd grown in. And that could, technically speaking, the most classic example, of course, was with wheat, with barley, with produce like that, where the kernel of wheat or barley grows inside a soft outer shell that's attached to a stalk, and you would thresh it, and the stalks and the kernel would become removed. Now, actually, at this early process, at this early stage in the process, so you with me so far? That was Dosh. Dosh is the act of removing the kernel from the plant material in which the kernel grew, the outer plant material. In other words, the separation of fruit from, you could even say, from stick, from branch, from tree, etc. Now, as it happens to be, let's make it very clear that removing an apple from a tree on Shabbos is not allowed, but not because of Dosh. It's harvesting. We've spoken about that a while ago. We're now discussing where something is already disconnected from the ground. In other words, the plant is no longer growing. It's not connected to its source of nutrition. But in the process of preparing the food, the produce, for consumption at a later stage, there were multiple stages. So you understand, of course, that although you can't chop a branch on a tree that's connected to a tree on Shabbos, but of course, if you have some plant material that's not connected any longer, it's no longer connected to the ground, of course you can cut it. And we do this the whole time in our kitchens on Shabbos. We take a cucumber and we cut the cucumber, and we take an onion and we cut the onion. We cut many plant or organic produce that grows from the ground on Shabbos, and that's not a problem because we've already disconnected the cucumber or the onion or the apple from its source of growth. And since it's already disconnected, there's no problem of cutting it into pieces because you aren't stopping, you're not hindering its ability to grow further through cutting. And it's actually interesting. It's even true about vegetables, which do actually develop further once they're disconnected from the tree. There are certain root vegetables that can develop further. Potatoes, carrots, etc. will in fact develop. They'll ripen or whatever, or even not just potatoes. Not connected, exactly. And then you're stopping it, you're cutting it. And equally bananas or anything for that matter, that they come off the tree and they're not so ripe. And as time goes on, they become more edible. They continue to ripen even when they're disconnected from tree. Nonetheless, Chazal understood that to cut a vegetable that is not connected, to cut a fruit or a vegetable that's not connected, is not a problem because it's considered the normative way to eat food, and it's not a problem. So we're not talking about taking the kernel of wheat out of the stalk of wheat when it's connected to the ground. That's not what we're talking about. That would be koitza. That would be harvesting. That would be an act of disconnecting something from where it grew. We're talking now, it's already been cut. And still, even though I just told you that you can cut a cucumber, but there's various things that you cannot do to food, to produce, which are part of the stages of development of taking plant life or any kind of plant life and creating a new entity to the plant life.
Can you open a banana?
Yes, we'll talk about that soon, but we're going to talk about opening banana. Dosh actually comes very much in. Very good. So we have the next stage in this process. This process starts with planting, harvesting, watering, harvesting, gathering in the chopped up, the cut off stalks. And now he wants to remove the kernels. So you can't say that removal of the kernels is like cutting an apple. And just because the wheat is disconnected from the ground, it should be okay. Because when you cut an apple, it's just an act of eating. It's an act of preparing food. But when you take the kernel out, it's a stage which will be followed by later stages in the development of the wheat. And this is always the classic idea of Shabbos. Shabbos is creative. Shabbos doesn't just mean doing anything. Getting a knife and cutting an apple is not creative. The apple is an apple before you cut it and after you cut it. The apple remains an apple. It was in one whole and now it's two halves or quarters or whatever it is. The same with a cucumber, the same with an onion, the same with a potato. But Meleches of Shabbos are creative activities. And in order to prepare bread, something went off, I don't know, maybe it's fine. It's fine. In order to prepare bread, that's fine, whatever.
I don't know.
Fine, good. In order to prepare bread, one must process the wheat. It has to be processed. It has to go through different stages of processing. And each stage of processing transforms what we've currently had into something new that has a different use or a different potential, you might say. So the wheat, when it's in the stalk, is useless with regard to making bread because you need to disconnect the wheat from the stalk. So the act of disconnecting, of separating out the wheat from the stalk is the act of threshing. The confusing thing is that the act of threshing shares parallels, it shares similarities with several other melachas. In the range of melachas, when we discuss the development of plant life to create something like bread, we find that we have dosh, which is threshing, which we said is this act of separating the kernel from the wheat. We also have, we're going to see at a later stage, boira, which is itself a new melacha, an independent melacha, which is an act of separation. Boira is when one separates the good from the bad. When one separates, if a person has a mixture and the good gets separated from the bad, that's boira, which effectively is dosh as well. As we just said, dosh is the removal of the wheat from the kernel, from the stalk. Well, that is the separation of something you want from something you don't want. That's boira. So boira is similar. Meraked is sieving, using a sieve, also to separate the good from the bad. And so you have effectively three melachas, three independent melachas, which do similar things, but then if they are the same, then why is it three independent melachas? It's an important point. I'm going to clarify this point. When Chazal said the 39 categories of melacha, they were telling you that any action you do on Shabbos is either one of those 39 categories of melacha or is permitted. There is nothing beyond the 39 categories of melacha that's forbidden, and there's nothing that is permitted within the 39 categories. So they gave us the exact precise categories, these parameters of melachas, 39 melachas, and they were very specific. Now, they wouldn't have told us three different words, three different of the 39 melachas for the same act. Because if it were to be the case that three melachas are one and the same thing, then in fact, I would tell you that there are not 39 melachas, but 37 melachas, right? If three melachas were really one, then why are we talking about 39 melachas? We would better say there are 37 melachas. So they weren't wasting their time when they told us there are 39 categories of melacha, is because there's 39. So if we find similarities between various melachas, we must still identify the differences between them. Because if there's no differences, if threshing is essentially separating, and separating is essentially sifting, And there's no difference between them. And if there's no difference between them, then there aren't 39 melachas, there's just 37 instead. And we could just call all of these the act of separating and not give them independent names, not say threshing and not say separating and not say sifting.
May I ask you, is
You may indeed.
sifting, for instance, for immediate use for your meal, for your children, then it is permitted?
When you sift?
Yeah.
Never allowed to sift. With a sieve, never allowed to sift on Shabbos.
Never allowed.
No, but you're absolutely right. And what you're saying is very much relevant to what we're discussing. Boira, for example, and where did you get this concept from? Because boira, separating, which isn't sifting, there is a concept of boira where it's permitted under certain conditions if you're about to prepare the immediate meal. And so you see, as an immediate example, that even though boira, separating and sifting would appear to be the same when we just say it superficially, but in fact, there you have a difference between a halachic difference between boira. You know, there's a permissibility, there's a leniency that applies in boira that does not apply in sifting. And I'll tell you that same leniency that applies in boira in separating doesn't apply in dosh, in threshing either. You cannot thresh if you're immediately about to eat. Now, you would say that kernels of wheat you can't eat immediately afterwards. You have to make it into bread. And you can't make bread on Shabbos because you can't bake bread. That's not entirely correct. People in the olden days, maybe still today, maybe in the farms, they would eat raw kernels of wheat. There was a way of eating raw kernels. It was like a snack or whatever it was. The cereals, exactly. Cereals basically are effectively raw. They're just toasted a bit. They roast them in the oven a bit. But raw kernels of wheat that are heated. The Torah talks about koloyos. Koloyos. What are koloyos? V'lechem v'koli v'charmel lo yisechelu ad etzem hayom hazeh. Yeah, the Torah tells us about the spheres ha'omer that until one brings the carbon of the mincha carbon that was brought on Shavuos, one can't eat until one brings the carbon omer on Pesach, carbon omer on Shavuos. Carbon omer on Pesach Shavuos. On Shavuos. Until one brings the carbon omer on Shavuos, one can't eat the new chodosh, whatever it is, the new from the wheat. And the Torah says lechem, different examples of how wheat was used, was eaten, was processed. Bread, koli and caramel. Koli is roasted kernels of wheat, koloyos, and caramel is just big kernels of wheat. Caramel, Rashi says, that the wheat becomes fat and full inside the stalk. Once it becomes stalk, you can eat it. So people would eat wheat, whatever, as a snack, whatever, if it was ripe, it was edible. In fact, what's interesting, as a side note, we like to go into side notes here. Wheat is a most unusual food, a most unusual plant, that it has the maximum number of brochas that can apply to one single product. Now, how many brochas can you say over a kernel of wheat? How many different brochas can you get out of a kernel of wheat? Hamotzi. When you make into bread, it's hamotzi. If you make into cake, it's mezonos. When's it shakoil?
Yeah, you can say always.
You can always say shakoil. It's true.
You can always say
true. When's it hardom? When's it shakoil? When will it be hardom? When will it be shakoil?
Yeah. You also look to the normal way. What's normal?
In the normal, exactly.
I don't know what's normal.
The halacha says absolutely. The halacha says that if you eat these kernels of wheat that we spoke about before, and they're raw but they're edible, you make hardomo. It's like a plant. It's a plant that grows from the ground. It's no different to a vegetable. You make hardomo. Yeah, if you eat you make hardomo.
Is tomato a fruit or?
Tomato is a vegetable. In the classification of fruit and vegetables in the halacha is different from the contemporary understanding of the classifications of fruit and vegetables. It's a word. It's semantics. Fruit. I mean, it's not semantics. The genus fruit is fruit and vegetables. However, science decides to characterize things. That's how it's characterized in the jumbo supermarket when you select on the scales whether it's a fruit or a vegetable. But in the halacha, fruits and vegetables are categorized slightly differently with a few, so there's comes out there's exceptions between the two. Generally speaking, although the halacha itself has a number of parameters, generally speaking, a fruit grows on a plant where the plant survives the year and the fruit fall off and the plant grows new produce. Whereas a vegetable is a plant which dies out at least once a year, maybe even more, but at least once a year. And the entire shrub, the entire growth regenerates itself from under the ground when the new produce comes out. Now, that's a very superficial division of fruit and vegetables, because there's a big discussion in the poskim about various sort of anomalous fruits and vegetables where you have, for example, plants that the plant doesn't completely die out, but it reduces in size significantly. So there'll still be, let's say, a root under the ground, and then in the new season it'll come up again, and all kinds of discussions like that. You have trees which look to us like trees and grow extremely fast and kind of die out very quickly as well. Papaya, the fruit papaya, I don't know how it's called in Dutch. You know this fruit papaya? Papaya is an extraordinary plant. You can Google this. It's one of the fastest growing trees as far as anyone's concerned. It's extremely fast growing. It takes approximately 11 months from planting to the first fruit coming off the tree. That's extremely fast for a fruit. I don't know how I personally have very little actual hands-on experience in the garden. We've spoken about this before, but my research into papaya has shown that it's very, very fast growing. And also the actual bush doesn't last very long. The tree itself doesn't last many years. So some of them, there's different strains of papaya, but it doesn't last very long. And there's a big discussion in the poskim already from hundreds of years ago. The Ben Ish Chai, Rabbi Yosef Chaim of Baghdad, already talks extensively about this papaya fruit and what bracha to make on it, whether it's a hardoma, because like we say, that the plant has characteristics of a vegetable bush, and it also has characteristics of a tree. It grows to some 15, 20 feet or something like that high. It looks like a tree. It's got a trunk. Freudian slip. Please forgive me. It's almost as bad as yeah, exactly. Yeah. No, but listen, if Biden can accidentally call Zelensky Putin, then I can accidentally call a trunk of a tree a Trump. But he's also big and heavy and a bit dense, like a piece of wood. So, all right, it's very, it'll be recorded. Have to be careful. They'll never give me a job in the United States after this.
That's something that reminds me of my student days.
That's good, like you have to stay here.
Fruit salad, including tomatoes. I thought it's tomatoes, it's the fruit that should be there. It's it doesn't somehow it's. And then there was also a biologist. That's not my strength. And he claimed, no. He's absolutely right, because tomatoes are fruits. It's not a vegetable.
Yeah.
So it's okay to
a tomato in the scientific classification. Tomatoes are fruits. Yeah. And another difference between us and the way that it's classified in the secular scientific world. And don't get me wrong, it's not a discussion against science at all. It's just two different ways of classifying a concept. We don't use the words fruits and vegetables. We say hardom on ha'etz. So we just want to know what's called a tree and what's called a bush. It's not. We have no. We're not up at odds against science in any way. So the reality is the reality. It's just how you classify things. A banana, exactly. A banana is a fruit in the. A banana is a fruit in the secular classification. If you look on the scales, it's classified as a fruit, and we classify it as a vegetable. We say hardom on a banana. Strawberries are another example. We say hardom on strawberries. Many people say hardom on strawberries. Some people say ha'etz on bananas.
Yeah. Bananas adama.
Adama.
It is 1 year, but I know exemption that it's more than 1 year. But we use for bananas,
yeah. The banana tree is another one that's discussed already in early Rishonim. We're talking about hundreds of years ago, talking about the banana fruit, that it grows on a bush, which the bush lasts about 2 to 3 years. It grows very big. It's a big banana bush. It looks like a small tree. So it's difficult to exactly categorize. It's a very detailed discussion in the poskim. Some things are easy and some things are more complicated. But
once I was with my daughter when she was 5 years in the forest, and there was hanging a banana peel in the tree. So my daughter said, "You learned me it's ha'adama, but
It's on a tree. It's on a tree. Yeah, it looks like a tree. It has characteristics of a tree.
Yeah.
Kind geleerd.
No, Hadoma, yeah.
Dat je dat door je dochter terecht.
And in the nut
They
family
say
as well,
it's a
Yeah,
big
peanuts
normal.
are Hadoma and all other nuts are Ha'etz.
But potatoes, when it's boiled, we say ha'adama. And if you
het is
take a
wel
little
goed.
bit raw, you say shakor. So it's the way how, and that's also with chocolate. Because some say, why should chocolate not be ha'adama?
Ha'etz.
What's no,
Ha'etz. Chocolate should be Ha'etz.
Ha'etz, yeah.
There's a rabbi in England, a senior rabbi in England called Dan Krause, who he holds that chocolate is Ha'etz.
Yeah.
He says chocolate is Ha'etz. It grows on a tree. But anyway, it's not shako. But anyway, let's get back to the kernel of
Actually, we
wheat.
have a nice saying in Dutch. We say aardappel. It's from the earth. So it's aardnoten. And not from the
Nut from the ground. What's an aardnoten? What's that?
Pinda's.
Pindas.
Pindas.
Peanuts. So you know it's Hadoma.
Centuries
Very
ago,
good.
when the Dutch did not know about bananas and they first saw them, they didn't know what name to give it, and they called them Indian figs. Bananas.
Indian figs. Bananas.
Yes. Because the soft inside, soft peel, you peel it off.
It's interesting to see over time how, like how the development of because as the world got smaller in some sense and people started traveling more and bringing things. Already hundreds and hundreds of years ago, there's a Rashi ala Torah where when Yosef at Tzaddik goes down to Mitzrayim, when the brothers go back to Yosef for the second time to buy food, and they know what they're up against because the previous time didn't go very well. So Yaakov says, if you must go, if we've got no other options, and he says, take a little gift for the viceroy, for Yosef. Obviously, they don't know it's Yosef. He says, take a gift. And he says, botnim ushkedim. Sorry, veloit, botnim ushkedim. Sorry, veloit, a bit of sorry and loit, which are spices, smelling spices. Botnim ushkedim. Yeah. Botnim ushkedim. Botnim and shkedim are two kinds of nuts. And Rashi there says that he doesn't know what botnim are. Yeah. And he says, if I'm not mistaken, he says, I think that it's a peach. He says, I think it's Rashi there. He says, I think it's a peach, but he admits, he says, I don't know what this, he didn't have this, whatever it was, so he had no clear idea what it.
What you looking? Around the corner. What you want? Outside. Yeah. Wie leeft er nog? Weet ik niet, dat ging er niet meer aan.
Yeah, botnim ushkedim, he says. Botnim, yeah, botnim we translated today. Again, we also have to be careful because our modern Hebrew translations might also be not based on the tradition. Sorry?
Like Sfarad in Tanakh.
Like Sfarad in Tanakh. Ashkenaz. Ashkenaz itself. Ashkenaz was one of the children of in Parashas Noach of Yefes, Mibnei Yovod, Goyim Ashkenaz, one of the descendants of Yefes, and Ashkenaz, the Rishonim say, wasn't originally the German Western European lands. Ashkenaz was somewhere in Asia, but it corroborates with the fact that the Europeans they emerged out of Asia, out of like a northern part of Asia. But that was the original Ashkenaz, long 3,000 years ago, but more than 3,000. Says Botnim lo yadati mahem. Yeah, he says I don't know what it is. Of a Perushi Aleph Beis Rav Makir, he has a dictionary of Rav Makir. He has Roisi. He says I saw this word. Now this is the old French word pistachiettes, which is pistachios, as he said. Botnim is pistachios. Not peanuts, but pistachios, a nut. The doimeli, he says, but I think Shahim Afarsakim, peaches, which it isn't. We know that even we recognize this French word, as old as it is, to be pistachios, not peaches. So Rashi had the Hebrew word, botnim, he had a French translation, but he had never seen this fruit. So he said, I don't know what this pistachiettes is. He said, I think it might be peaches. And we even in the modern dialect, we can understand the word because we know what the fruit is.
I look for it because I want to know which broker you have to.
On pistachio.
Het is een struik in het Engels.
Bush.
A bush.
It is a small tree. So I think personally that you have to make bread eights.
Bread braids on it. On pistachios, you make bread braid. Yeah. Only on peanuts you make cardamom. Yes, absolutely. You make
The pindas.
yes, cardamom. Yeah. But anyway, but we went off topic. But I was just saying the 4 things you make on wheat. Hamotzi if you make into bread. Mazonas if you make into cakes. Shahako, hardoma if you eat the kernel raw. And shahakoil if you grind the kernel into flour and you eat raw flour, because as our friend said, because it's not the normal way, it gets downgraded to shahakoil. So you have 4 brochas coming out of one product. And we're not saying 4 brochas where you mix it with other things. That's why you have a new brocha. That's not counted. Where you eat it in its pure form, but 4 different brochas. Amoitzi, mazonas, adom, and shahakoil. A unique fruit. But what's interesting in Agadata, in Drush, as well about the wheat, about the wheat, is that according to the Medrash, there's a machloikus in the Medrash, what the fruit that Adam Harishon ate from the tree was, what fruit it was.
We don't know.
We don't. Well, the Medrash brings a few different fruits.
Yes.
It's hook.
Well, the going think it was an apple.
And
the Christians think it was an apple.
In exhibition with the schilderij in the picture.
Painting.
The painting that was an eating apple, and I was explaining to the people around me that it's not at all.
No one ever said it was an apple.
He said, "You belong to the museum." Not at all.
Well, you said there it's the only product. There's no other way. You say more close. But I think the grape might be the same.
The grape we say hagefen. Or eights. Yes, but that's what I said to you before. That once it gets mixed into something else, then it's not in its pure form, and so you're really saying the other brocha, and you're just. So as I say, that's why I said the wheat is in 4 different brochas, but in its pure form, unadulterated.
Okay.
You know, where it remains the primary ingredient. So and according to the Medrash gives a few different ideas of what the tree might have been. Obviously it's Kabbalistic or mystical, so whatever the Medrash is trying to teach us. And one opinion the Medrash is that it was a wheat, which is unusual because wheat is not ha'etz, and the Torah says it's a tree. So there's a discussion about that. But that's a side point, right?
It didn't say which brocha he said.
No, it didn't say which brocha he said.
No, we don't know.
We don't know. It might have been a fig. The Medrash says. The Medrash has a few ideas based on the Masorah, based on various traditions and readings into Psukim, what it might have been.
You don't get a fine if you say the wrong broch.
If you say, that's a good question about Hilchos Brochos. We could learn Hilchos Brochos another time, but if you say the wrong, if you don't know what brocha to make, yeah, if you don't, then say shahakol, yeah. The Mishnah Berurah actually is a little bit nervous about that. In all honesty, the Mishnah Berurah basically says if you don't know what brocha to make and you can find out, then you shouldn't say shahakol. He says shahakol is a default b'diavad bracha. It's a post facto bracha. That means shahakol. If you made ha'etz on something that's mazoinas, then you have to repeat the bracha if you're going to continue eating. The shahakol is a b'diavad bracha. That means if you made shahakol on something, if you already said it, you're covered, whatever it was. But the Mishnah Berurah says that you shouldn't just lechatchila to begin with make shahakol if you don't know. If you can find out, you should ask what bracha is it and make the correct bracha. So it's not exactly that you can make shahakol to begin with. Shahakol is the bracha you make that works if you didn't know what bracha to make. But
now
how much effort should you need to find it out?
the discussion, if you should, Mishnah Berurah is more, in all honesty, is more of the opinion that you shouldn't eat the food. You know, he says, what's the problem? So don't eat it. If in doubt, don't eat it. If you don't know.
What is it?
Yeah, no, it's true. But if Mishnah Berurah says like, if you can't find out, then refrain.
So
He's quite strict about it.
For coffee, I drink coffee. Shahakol.
Yeah.
I see this cake here, and then I can take.
Zoinis.
But if the cake comes in later, I wasn't thinking of the cake, then I think I should still say mezonot. Right?
Absolutely, yeah, absolutely.
But the cake, yes.
But for the cake, but okay, we could go into Hilchos Brochos. So we could learn Hilchos Brochos for years on end. So Hilchos Brochos is very fascinating. But you still make a mazonos on the cake. Now let's get back to
I
Dosh, the
see
threshing.
this with the kiddush in shul. The after Pesach, there is still from Pesach the
Ja, maar dat
bokkenpootjes.
is,
And you see people saying, mezonot.
is het niet.
Dat kan
Is
niet.
That is the reason there's no kiddush in Pesach and
Ja,
Shul.
maar sommige shuls willen dat toch. En
Oké,
ze nemen
goed.
daarna toch
En they
nog
say
Pesach.
shakel on the.
Ja, dat is geen schakel.
It's a shak. What you're talking about the Pesach cakes?
Ja, bezoinis. Is geen bezoinis.
But by us there are mazonos cakes on Pesach. You know, Hasidish. You can make if you make a cake out of matzah meal.
Oké.
Make mazonos on
Ja,
it.
oké, goed. Ja, people don't eat it.
The Hasidim don't. So the manufactured cakes very often are
My
non-gebrocks.
wife still makes it.
Makes of course, yeah.
Oké,
The
let's go
shackle
to
cakes
the
are
subject.
in England they make kiddushim on Pesach after davening, and even if they don't have mazonos cakes, they have this patent that the Mishnah Brewer actually is not so keen on doing it as a lechatchila, but it's the custom is that if you have to have mazonos always, we say after you have kiddush. Mishnah Brewer says if you don't have that another option which isn't as good is to drink another revius of grape juice or wine. So you make kiddush and you drink an extra revius of grape juice or wine, and that's called kiddush, and then you can eat other things as well. So basically in Gateshead, for example, where Toby's from, they make like if someone has a simcha on Pesach, they make simcha and they have no mazonos cake, they have shackle cakes, but everyone, there's loads of grape juice all over the table. So everyone comes in and makes kiddush and drinks an extra revius of grape juice, and then they eat their cake.
That's okay.
But today the kiddush is more holy than the shul service. They pay 500-600 euro for it, and
It's a different generation.
Waar is dat?
in heel veel shuls.
Not in ours, pal.
No. Only for the ladies.
Our guys are sit and learn and do tehillim after davening.
No.
All right. So Dosh threshing. So what we said now is that that the threshing, this kernel, although, and that's why we went off the point, although it can be eaten, but it's still a stage in the process of developing food, and so you remove the kernel from the ever. Boira separating, actually, as we said before, there's three melachas that seem to be saying similar things: threshing, separating, and sieving. Now, in fact, threshing is the removal of the edible product from the inedible. If we really define it, it's the dislodgement. It's dislodging the kernel from the stalk, but the kernel and the stalk are still mixed up. But it's been extracted from its casing. In other words, it grows stuck to its casing. The stalk, the outer shell of the wheat is like a casing. It's like a shell of a nut. It's not so hard, and the kernel is stuck inside it. When you bang it, the force dislodges the wheat, the kernel of wheat, from the outer stalk, from the outer shell. But you may still have a big mixture, a big mess of wheat kernels and sticks and stalks and other things. So that you've already done dosh, even though it's still in a mixed up state, and you still need to further refine it by separating the good from the bad, but dosh has been done. And so therefore the next stage, which is boira, which is the next stage that comes into to play, is that you now actually separate. You have a mixer. You might have a big bowl, and you separate the good from the bad. So boira is a separation of good from bad, and therefore isn't limited to the same limitations as dosh. Dosh, Chazal tell us, a novel idea that only applies by a couple of melachas. Dosh is only ein disha ela b'gedolei karka. You can only do the malacha. You can only transgress the malacha of dosh with produce that grows from the ground, natural organic produce. You can't have a concept of threshing with something that doesn't grow from the ground, because dosh is a specific malacha in which you dislodge the food from the outer casing in which it grew. Once we get to boira and we identify, we analyze that boira it's true that classically you would now have a big bowl. If we follow our storyline of creating bread, you will have a big bowl, and in the bowl is organic material, but there's wheat and there's stalks, and you separate the wheat from stalks. But now the actual act of separation of wheat from stalk has no relevance to the fact that it grew together. All that we care about right now is that there's a mixture of good and bad. And so we've now moved away from the concept of extracting something from where it grew and using terminology of agriculture. And we've gone into just a purely, and we're using terminology of a pure mixture. And once we talk about a mixture, we could have a mixture of anything, not just organic produce. We could have a mixture of cups, or a mixture of books, or a mixture of jackets, or a mixture of couples. We could have a mixture of lots of things. In other words, what we mean to say is, even though, and this is a very specific point in categorizing the differences between the various melachas, even though in the classic way in which boira is done, it's a continuation of the melacha of dosh. You know, as you first thresh, you extract the kernel, and then you must separate off the good bits from the bad bits, or maybe there's stones that are inside as well. Even though it is a separation in the process of creating bread, but it has a completely different parameter. Dosh, threshing, will only be relevant for things that grew from the ground, because the definition of threshing is the extraction of something from the place in which it grew. The extraction of something in the place which it grew. Whereas boira is separating good from bad. When you talk about separating good from bad, when you focus on separating good from bad, it becomes irrelevant that 5 minutes before this kernel was still attached, biologically attached, organically attached to the wheat. It's irrelevant. As far as we're concerned now, the melacha is separating. And therefore, Chazal understood that although the melacha of dosh is only applicable with things that grew from the ground, but the melacha of boira has nothing to do with things that grew from the ground, even though characteristically it would have been done in things that grew from the ground, but it doesn't become isolated. It's not exclusive to things that grew from the ground. It's equally true about other things as well. And they understood that because boira now is a mixture. And if it's a mixture, it's irrelevant what happened before. It's an independent melacha of separating off good from bad in a mixture. And so therefore, even though we said before that the melachas seem to have a similar kind of, you would say, underlying characteristic, a common denominator, that they all contain the acts of separating one thing from another, something you want from something you don't want, but they're totally different. Dosh is the separation, the extraction, we should say. Instead of using the word separation, we should say it's the extraction of something from where it grew, from the outer casing that it grew, whereas boira is merely or purely a separation of loose items that are mixed together in a bowl, on a table, in any state that they're mixed, but a separation of loose items, which is not specific, exclusive to things that grew from the ground.
Just a question. If I walk along a field and there's something growing, and I touch it, I didn't mean to do it, and the kernels fall off. Am I allowed to eat it?
Once the kernels have fallen off.
Yeah.
No, I'll tell you why, but not because of
It's not dash. It's not
That's right.
And that's the other one.
It's muksa.
Yeah.
Completely
Okay.
different. It's a drabon of muksa. Yeah. You've not done
Yeah.
any malacha at all. What is happening? I'll ask you better. What if you didn't brush past it? What if it fell on its own? The apple fell from the tree on Shabbos. It remains muksa because once it, when Shabbos comes in, why is it muksa? Because when at the time that Shabbos came in, you had no way, you had no intention to eat it because it was stuck on a tree, and you can't take it from the tree because that would be.
Anyway,
Why is it muksa?
You don't know when it fell from the tree. It can be on Shabbos, can also be before Shabbos.
And let's say it fell from before Shabbos on the tree, on Friday, and you just didn't collect it. Is it muksa?
On Shabbos, yes.
No.
Oh.
No, if an apple falls from the tree on Friday,
But how do you know that?
no. So, for example, if you have an apple tree in your garden,
You saw it.
you saw it, and you didn't, you saw an apple, you had an apple tree in your garden, and there's an apple on the floor, and you have a clear idea. It's this green apple that's on the floor there, and whatever, and you think to yourself, like, I'm gonna maybe bring it in before Shabbos and put it in the fridge or in a fruit bowl, or you just don't get round to it. And on Shabbos morning, you say, hey, I would like to eat that apple. You can eat it. It's not muksa. It fell off the tree before Shabbos. Muksa is a very interesting subject, but the idea here of muksa is basically anything that's inaccessible, anything that's not reachable, that's not attainable. At the moment that Shabbos comes in, we call it technically not the moment, but bein hashmoshas, the twilight period when Shabbos comes in, between sunset and night. If at that moment it's inaccessible to you, then it remains forbidden the rest of Shabbos regardless of whether it became accessible or not. So because an apple that's currently on the tree when Shabbos comes in is inaccessible, why is it inaccessible? Because it's forbidden to take the apple off the tree. So even if the apple then fell off the tree and you've done nothing wrong whatsoever, but it remains muksa for the rest of Shabbos, because at the point that Shabbos came in, at that moment, it was maximidaito. He had put it aside mentally and said, I can't use this apple on Shabbos. The word muksa literally means I can't use it. I max it. I designate it. I say it's distant from me. It's been put in storage. So because the apple is on the tree and I cannot use it on Shabbos, so therefore, even if it does fall and it's now no longer forbidden, because in that sense, because you're not doing anything wrong to take it, but it remains muksa.
It's das you call it das also. If you say, if you know that you will have some thing that's not allowed, when you didn't put it,
Maximi das.
So what happens if you say, well, but in your mind, so if an apple falls from the tree and I want to eat it, is it then mukse? Is it then das hoekse? How do you call that?
If, in other words, can you have,
Even if you don't know?
in other words, can you say something might, if it falls from a tree? No, but you can't in that particular example. There is discussions in Hilchos Yomta, for example, about things that are about to happen. In other words, it's inevitable that they'll happen. With regard to the fruit on the tree, you can't. But there's other things where, let's say, there's discussions about like a building that's going to fall down and using its wood on the Yomta and things like that. Where basically the building is about to fall down, it's weak and it's about to fall down. You can't dismantle a building on Yom Tov. Imagine you had a wooden shed, and the wooden shed is very shaky and it's going to fall. On Yom Tov, you want to use the wood to make fire, to cook. So you can't dismantle the wood from the building because that's soisa, that's demolishing a building, which is forbidden on Yom Tov like it's forbidden on Shabbos. But if the building is about to fall and he sits there and he says, I know the building is about to fall, then on Yom Tov, because it's about to fall, because it's inevitable to happen, so he might be able to use the wood under certain conditions on Yom Tov. But there's a big discussion about it, about when exactly we say it and when we don't say it, when we say muksa midas.
But if there falls one apple here of Yom Tov, it's easy. But maybe it's a pile of apples.
And you don't know which one.
And then you don't. And
So
then
it's written on it.
maybe someone was falling on Yom Tov. But they
So what's the law? What's the law about sofik
majority?
muksa? What do we say about sofik muksa? If you have a doubt about muksa, is it muksa or not? Normally, when it comes to drabonons, any drabonon, we would say if there's a doubt, you can be lenient. That's normally the rule. Sofik drabonon the hokel. A lord, anything that's drabonon, you can be lenient in doubt. Specifically in muksa, Chazal said that there's no leniency in doubt. Because you have to be certain. There is a big discussion out there in Hilchos Shabbos. Okay, but that's so dosh. So now we've identified it. Dosh is the extraction of the food from the thing. Now, because we've made that identification, it doesn't need to be with wheat, and it doesn't need to be with something that we've still got many stages left to go. For example, you have these peas in the pod. We call it in English snap peas. It's like a erta, but in the original.
Die is ook kunnen eten. Nee. Het is anders. Nee. Het zijn boontjes die kan je zo eten.
And when you open it, it has little peas.
Nee, maar het is een speciaal. Ik weet wat hij bedoelt, maar ik weet niet hoe het heet.
We call it in English snap peas.
Gewoon snap. Het heet ook geloof ik iets van snap. I think it's about the same word. Also snap boontjes. Die mag je zo eten. Die kan je zo rauw eten.
So you have this thing. So in it, there's like in each snap pea, there's perhaps like 4 or so little peas, little balls of peas, and they're not loose. If you shake it around, it doesn't rattle like a rattle toy. They're stuck. Each pea is stuck with a very thin connection to the encasing. They get dislodged very easily. They get dislodged sometimes by the time they come, they're already dislodged. It's very easy to dislodge it. You know what I'm talking about?
Yes.
I can imagine that. Know which.
You're going to go today to the supermarket. And you're going to look for them. So the peas grow inside the thing, and they grow and they're attached. Now, technically, and I'm going to tell you why it's not the case. But technically speaking, it could be theoretically possible that the removal of the pea from the casing would also be dosh. Even if it's now edible, it's now ready to eat, because that is dosh. Dosh is the removal of the pea or the thing from the thing it grew inside. It's attached, it's stuck, and you dislodge it. That's what dosh is. As we just said, that's threshing. However, it's not forbidden. I'm going to tell you why it's not forbidden.
No, because it's for your own use. At that moment, you're eating it.
But that's only the case, my good friend, with boira. With dosh, it becomes irrelevant because dosh, and because classic dosh was with the wheat that was taken out the thing, and dosh had nothing to do with immediate usage. No, in the normative sense, dosh was done with wheat that could be a long way away from eating. So therefore, even if one does have an immediate intention to eat, it doesn't take it away from being called dosh. So you're right in boira.
So it's not allowed to do it.
It wouldn't be allowed were it not for something else. A new thing I'm going to tell you. Another time, if we think about it theoretically, that I'm just trying to give you a demonstration of the theoretical concept of dosh in a different plant, not just in the form of a kernel of wheat. But it happens to be it's not dosh for another reason. Chazal said, if we look back again, the way we understand melachas is that we have the classic, the prototype, which in this form we said now many times is the wheat from it doesn't need to be wheat specifically, but a grain or something that grew in a shell that's connected to a stalk. That's the classic, that's the prototype melacha. Then what we have when we look at that prototype melacha is we have an inedible outer casing, a casing that's not edible, and the thing that you want is edible. So actually we're going to now redefine, or sort of more finely define dosh. Edible from not edible.
Yes,
that's not allowed. That's not allowed. The dosh is edible from not edible. Not specifically when you're going to eat it, that's irrelevant, but the fact that you're removing something that will be edible, which is the wheat or the kernel, the edible from the non-edible. When we look at the snap peas, when we look at the snap peas, these peas, the outer casing is also edible. And so for a different reason, it wouldn't be called dosh, because the outer casing is edible and the inner thing is also edible. So removal of edible from edible is not called dosh. Wait.
In a lot of families.
You want to say something? I held you.
Pindaspel op vrijdagavond.
During Friday evening or Swedish dishes, there were peanuts.
Yes. Let's talk about peanuts. Good. Let's talk about opening the shell. Opening the shell. Dosh. What are we going to do about that? Huh?
It's not allowed.
A lot of families on Friday night.
People get always when you talk about Hilchos Shabbos. Whenever you talk about Hilchos Shabbos, people get nervous because they say, "But everyone does it." Before I've even said it's permitted. It's permitted. I'm going to tell you why. Yeah. Don't worry. Every so often, occasionally in life, I admit that occasionally in life, one does discover something forbidden that one didn't know. But for the vast majority of the time, Baruch Hashem, we get it right. So now I'm going to tell you. I'm going to tell you about these. We call them monkey nuts. These peanuts that come in a shell. It's like a very cardboard-like shell. Peanuts, pistachios, bananas. The removal of a banana from the peel is a banana from the outer casing. Yes. Let's go further. Grapes. Now grapes don't have an outer casing, but the grape comes on what? It comes on a bunch, on a truss, and it's connected to a vine, to the stick. So you're disconnecting it from the place that it grew. And we said it's obviously disconnected from the ground. That's fine, but it's still dosh. Tomatoes on the cherry tomatoes or vine tomatoes. Sometimes you buy tomatoes on a vine, on the thing. Dosh, all these things. It should all be dosh. Why are they not dosh? They are allowed. And the answer is, and this is a brilliant idea that was proposed it's already found much earlier on, but it's developed by a safe called Eloel who expresses it very clearly. Another parameter of dosh, amongst all other parameters, is that dosh still is an early melacha that takes place, doesn't need to be done in the field, but it's part of a process of development in the early development of things. He says like this: anything that it's usual and normative to come to your table in this current state, in other words, it's not shelled, it doesn't need to be peeled or shelled or removed from the vine earlier, it's completely normal to come, and that's the way it's served just before eating, is permitted to remove, and it's not called dosh, not because you're just about to eat, even if you weren't just about to eat, but because the branch, let's say the vine and the thing, or the peanuts, is not dosh, because dosh is threshing in an earlier stage, and this is the last stage. It's not an earlier stage. Now the dosh, again, the prototype dosh would be an earlier stage of development. So anything that could normally be done or would normally be done in an earlier stage of development is forbidden, even if you don't mean it earlier stage. So even if you want to eat the kernel of wheat now, it doesn't matter, because the kernel is usually separated in an earlier state of eating. But anything that comes to the table that's sold and brought to human consumption with this connecting thing is not considered. The removal of fruit from vine, or of peanut from shell, or of pistachio from shell is not considered dosh, because he says it's not an earlier stage in the development. It's not an earlier stage in the production. It's the ending, and so it's not called dosh, because dosh is an earlier stage. There are other. Moshe Feinstein has a different explanation. He says it's only when the activity is. Moshe Feinstein wants to say it's only when the activity is directed at the inner item. So that means that when you do dosh, you remove the kernel. You remove the kernel, from the thing, and you want the kernel to come out of the thing. When you peel, the activity is directed at the peel. When you peel, you're doing something with the peel. You're not removing it. So it works in some. It doesn't work.
You're allowed to eat just the peel.
No, you won't eat the peel, but the activity is directed. Dosh, you can eat it. Well, you could eat it, but it's not edible. I mean, it's edible. Yeah, it is edible. But a banana peel isn't edible or ever.
Een appelschil kan je eten.
Appelschil kan je eten.
May I tell you something what Rav S, he didn't like to eat peanuts on Sudashlishi, so we get it, because there can fall a good one into the
mixture.
plate, and they had to look to
very
separate it. He didn't like it. He didn't want it.
Because of boira, because you might come to do boira to separate. Right. Okay.
I have a question. It's not allowed to crush pepper on Shabbat, right?
Yes.
No.
If you have a whole grain and you eat it and it's between your teeth, you can crush it still.
Absolutely.
But how come it's not allowed? Because it's like preparing food, and you're also not allowed on a Shabbat when you prepare a dish with fish to take the bones out.
Yeah.
People have to do that on their. But if you have it well done and it comes off the bone, is it the same thing?
In other words, the bone comes off very easily.
Yes.
Without doing anything.
Yes.
If it happens on its own, it happens on its own. It happens on its own. It happens to be. We'll talk one day. Ezra Shem, good health. We'll talk about boira. I'll be the next malacha. But for your information, there's a machlokas here between many of the Ashkenazi authorities and the Sephardi authorities. In fact, the Ben Ish Chai says that you can remove the bones from a fish when it's cooked. You don't need to take the fish from bones. You can remove the bones from fish. The Ben Ish Chai is of the opinion that the removal of bones from fish, there's two reasons given. One is not the Ben Ish Chai is. It's one, and the Ben Ish Chai says it's complicated. He says it's part of eating, not part of separating. He terms it differently. The Mishnah Berurah doesn't allow it. The Mishnah Berurah says you have to remove the fish from the bones, but the Sephardim do follow. Many Sephardim follow the Ben Ish Chai. They can remove the bones from the fish. But we'll talk more about that another time.
Okay.
Shkoyach.
Shkoyach. I have a due date for you, if you can. Finish, yeah. 18th of November. 17 Cheshvan.
Why not?
Why not? Okay.
Yeah, 18th November.
18th November. I'm not. I think I'm not here, but all the people.
Where are you? Anywhere nice?
I want to go to Africa, Cape Town.
Very nice on the trip. Very, very nice. How long will the trip be? A Jewish trip like last time?
Yeah. 40 days about. But I'm
You
not
can come on
excited.
Zoom. You can come on Zoom.
Yeah. I fly that day.
Yes. You want to speak about it? Yeah.
En persen, als je een shisha uitpersen, als je direct opdringt.
What needs to be done?
Since I'm 50, I use it.
Yes.
Maar ik weet ook,
The first 10 years, I always
voelen in de teken.
this cook also do the shofar.
Yeah.
When I had in Manchester, Shua of
Yeah.
Dat moment was wel met die
it's in 2008. And it was
Maar als ik die
just about
paper over
hearing
mijn
it,
slaap
so
breng,
you
slaap
shofar, blowing shofar. I see many, he said it's better to take it out during the first 30 block, and then taking it back. But last year, I didn't hear the Baltokia saying the bracha without hearing. So it's getting. So I don't want to. Is it really necessary?
Can you hear the shofar?
Je begint ermee.
I tried it yesterday.
Dan kun je zeggen,
I
kom
can
hoor.
hear the shofar without. But I don't know if I hear, hear the noise. So I don't know.
It's clear or unclear?
Second day you are not alone.
In a teruah, in the
Because you showed it.
It's getting
What?
worse. So I don't, and then I have to bring it somewhere. Far in the school.
Hij weg?
Now it's loud. I'm getting louder, so it's
Wat?
it won't disturb us.
Oké. Je hoort van mij. Even kijken voor woensdag of we 1 of 2 hebben. Rond 10 uur 's avonds geef ik een WhatsApp.
Because when you are
Oh, goed. Ik zal het zo even vertellen.
It's easy to be machmir.
Yeah.
But now 76, and then you